little bit about the future of farming. So the UN Food and Agricultural Organization has a statistic that by the year 2050, we're going to need to increase our food production by 70% to meet global food demand. That's a pretty massive number. But when you look at it, there's a bunch of reasons why it's going to be pretty challenging to actually meet that. So starting out, there's already been and there's increasingly a slowdown in yield production. So if you look at the last 150 years or so of farming, there's been a tremendous amount of technological change, and we've reaped huge rewards from everything from genetically engineered plants to GPS mapped fertilization. All kinds of different technologies have had a huge impact on increasing the yield per acre of farmland. Unfortunately, a lot of those technologies, we've basically squeezed all the juice out of that fruit. And there's not a ton of future yield enhancement that we can really get out of it going forward. Yes, there will be some changes to yield enhancement, but by and large, a lot of that has already taken place. The next is the growth of arable land. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization estimates that by 2050, we're going to go from 1.59 billion hectares of arable farmland to 1.62 billion hectares. And to give you a little bit of comparison, a hectare is about 2.2 acres. But that's not a huge jump, right? That's a pretty incremental growth in farmland. Definitely not a 70% growth that would be necessary to meet the demands to feed our population by the year 2050. On top of that, you've got things like climate change, which not only makes it more unpredictable, weather can obviously damage and destroy crops, but things like droughts can also be really negative in terms of crop yields. And the more unpredictable weather patterns are, the more challenging it is to harvest and produce food. Obviously, we have increasing demands for energy, increasing demands for water. Both of those are going to pose headwinds to meeting our challenge of feeding the planet by the year 2050. And the last is kind of interesting, but it's the impact of urbanization on farming as a profession. Very few people are in the farming profession today, and a lot of the people who would become farmers are moving into urban areas. On top of that, these suburbs are sort of sprawling more and more and more and taking up a lot of the arable farmland, which is why the growth in arable land is going to be so small. So I want to talk a little bit about food in America today. The average farmer today is 58 years old in America. And in fact, in the year 1790, 90% of the population was in the agricultural industry. Today, it's less than 2%. Is anybody in the audience, is anyone here a farmer? Nice. Is anybody planning on going into farming? Right, so there's a serious problem. We don't have a lot of farmers. We don't have a lot of people who want to go into farming. And that dovetails with some really interesting trends that are taking place within America. The next is food deserts. Food deserts are areas where people can't get access to fresh, healthy food. It can be anywhere from an urban environment to a rural environment, but people can't get access to fresh and healthy food, and so they have to subsist on high-calorie, low nutrient-rich foods, which further increases the cycle of obesity and poverty in many different areas of America. So food deserts are a major problem, and I want you to kind of hold that in context as we think about food in America today and how we might be able to address some of these challenges. This is a look at the number of farming jobs from the year 1840 to today, and it also shows something else. It shows the decline in industrial jobs. The Rust Belt, as they call it, has seen about a 50%, a little bit less than that, drop in the number of people who are employed. And we've seen the effects of that, right? People are losing their jobs, people's jobs are being replaced by technology, and in many cases, a lot of these workers are having a really, really difficult time finding out how they're going to employ themselves, or what jobs are going to exist in a place like Belpre, Ohio, or Morgantown, West Virginia, right? A lot of the jobs are just gone. Coal industry jobs, mining jobs, industrial jobs, they don't exist. And you can see that in the numbers from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So in the search to solve all these different problems, it's going to lead us to two very different kind of strange places. The first is this desert. Does this look like a fertile growing environment to anyone here? Does it look like you could create a sustainable, profitable farming business in this desert? This is in Almeria, Spain. It's a place called Tabernas. In fact, over the last 20 years in Tabernas, they've built a greenhouse growing operation that's so large it can literally be seen from low Earth orbit. And that greenhouse operation has contributed $1.5 billion annually to the GDP of Tabernas, to the GDP of Almeria, which is a tiny and impoverished region of Spain. So there might be some lessons when we look at places like Tabernas, which has been described as an economic miracle. An impoverished desert region suddenly turns into a profitable, thriving agricultural center. We thought there might be some lessons that we could learn and apply to solving some of the problems with food in America today. So, how are we going to solve this gap? How are we going to help the impoverished Rust Belt workers? How are we going to combat food deserts in America? What are we going to do about the fact that the average farmer is 58 years old and that people are not going into agricultural industry? But most importantly, what are we going to do to feed the planet by the year 2050? In my personal quest to solve this challenge, in February of 2017, I found myself in a parking lot in the Marcy Projects in Brooklyn. This is what I was looking at. It was freezing cold, I had my hat on, scarf, and I was trying to figure out what exactly am I doing here. There was something going on in this parking lot that was different, that was unique, that really shined a light on what's possible with farming in America today and the future of farming. Inside of each one of those shipping containers is a farm. It's a vertical farm. And I'm going to show you what the inside looks like in a second because it's pretty amazing. But every one of those individual shipping containers today, in February in Brooklyn when I was visiting, produces as much as 1 acre of farmland can produce. So this is vertical farming. We think that vertical farming can be one of the big solutions to the food challenges that we currently face in America. This kind of gives you some, there's me hanging out inside one of those shipping containers that I just showed you a photo of. As you can see, it was freezing cold outside. I had my jacket on and my scarf and everything, but it was nice and rosy inside, it was warm. There was basil growing at the exact right temperature in a climate-controlled environment. And you can see, kind of just get a sense of what some of these shipping container farms look like. So, what exactly is vertical farming? Vertical farming is indoor growing. It's using hydroponics. You can grow 24/7, 365 days a year. It's climate controlled, so you can grow to the exact specifications of whatever particular plant you're trying to grow. You can have the right temperature, you can have the right humidity, you can have the right exposure to light and darkness. It gives you precise control of these plants and gives you the ability to grow them in your backyard. So literally, in what would have been a food desert in an impoverished neighborhood in Brooklyn, they have 10 of these shipping containers that are producing, depending on the estimates and the crop that you grow, between what would be 10 and 20 acres of farmland worth of fresh produce that's organic and that's available 365 days a year. So that's Square Roots. I talked a little bit about that. Square Roots is actually a company that we've invested in at Fresh Hospitality. So that's why I was up in that parking lot in Brooklyn last February. We invested in Square Roots to provide them with some capital so that they could expand their operations. They're one of the pioneers of container-based vertical farming. And there's another kind of vertical farming though, and something else that I'm going to show you. Container farms are great, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a second. But there's another company that's also in New York, it's actually technically in New Jersey, called Aero Farms. Aero Farms is fascinating. They're doing vertical farming on an even larger scale. This warehouse is 78,000 square feet. But on this roughly 1 acre of land in New Jersey, they're producing what will be the equivalent of 130 acres worth of farmland of food. That's a pretty staggering statistic. When we look at things like water consumption, this Aero Farms facility, because it's hydroponic and the plants get exactly as much water as they need, and all the nutrient-rich water can be recycled and reused, there's no water waste at all, it uses 70% less water than traditional farming. So there's a couple different models of vertical farming that we can think about today. We've got container farms like Square Roots. We've got larger vertical farms and warehouse-based vertical farming like Aero Farms. But we're helping to pioneer and create this change. In fact, not only did we invest in Square Roots, we're actually opening a container farm right here in Nashville in Germantown. So our container farm is already in the ground. We've already got our first seedlings planted, and we hope to have crops coming out of the container farm within a month or two. That project, assuming that things go well, we're actually planning on expanding that and building hopefully 4 or 5 more container farms in the Nashville market in the next 18 to 24 months. That's not all we're doing though. We're also working to help revitalize the Rust Belt. Through some connections that we have in West Virginia, specifically with the University of West Virginia University, we are working with them to not only we're working with them to take all of the university's current agricultural assets and leverage those to create a public-private partnership to help the university pioneer new growing methods and strategies to help the state of West Virginia, which is one of the most impoverished states in America, find new jobs and new opportunities and new ways to grow in places that it's currently not possible to be a farmer. In the cold, hilly, rocky mountains of West Virginia, where maybe some of the farms can have cattle, but that's about it. We've got a number of properties that West Virginia University has that we're working with them to help revitalize and turn those into economic centers where we can create new job growth in West Virginia. We've also invested in an organic, hydroponic, robotics-enabled microgreen growing warehouse in Morgantown. There was a student that went to the university that came out of their agricultural program. We invested in his warehouse and we're helping to pioneer and grow that technology so that we can expand it to more markets and more places that need these solutions. So, can we feed the planet by 2050? Can we solve food deserts? Can we solve the challenge of aging farmers in America? We think that vertical farming is one of the solutions that can be an incredible tool to help us not only meet the demand of our planet, but help fix some serious social challenges within America. Thank you.